Okay, are we ready to go again for another scintillating, exciting, but quite informative edition of the Midnight Skeptic? Let me play my play-in music. You are listening to KPCA LP, Petaluma, California, at 103.3 FM and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. And this is the Midnight Skeptic. The views of the Midnight Skeptic are not, repeat, not necessarily the views of KPCA or any of its affiliates. Okay, this is Wednesday, November 2nd, a brand new month after the month of October that was kind of a bust. Halloween, I'm glad that's over with. We got 0 kids coming by this house. So I didn't buy very much candy, but what there was, I kind of out of obligation ate it. Oh, so I've got to eat all sorts of salads now to make up for that. Okay, the views of the Midnight Skeptic, as everybody now knows, are the right and correct views and should be the views of everybody out there who listens to this and everybody out there who has a thinking brain cell in their bodies. Okay, I am woke. I'm going to say this at the start of every show now, and I just ran across a Facebook posting, and I don't know who exactly posted it, but I agree with it wholeheartedly. Quote, some people use the word woke as if it's supposed to be an insult, but mostly they use it because they can't spell empathetic, educated, or enlightened. In other words, everything that MAGA head Republicans are not. Okay. And I am on Spotify, and I'm on that via Anchor.fm internationally. I got about a dozen or so followers in the EU, 1 in Russia, 2 in Canada, a couple in New Zealand, a couple in Australia. That's my international crowd. But before I go any further with that, with the shout-outs, if you want to send me any hate mail or death threats, which is how MAGA head Republicans roll, send them to the Midnight Skeptic at gmail.com. And for those of you who want to suggest things you want me to cover or suggestions of how I could improve the show, although I don't know how that's possible, send that along to the same address. I'll get them. Okay, shout outs, and I'm doing this without notes. Locally, Tom Gaffey, manager of the Phoenix Theater, and sort of like a godfather to a lot of alternative teens that hang out there. Okay, Nariman, Tom and Nancy, Rich and Kathy Berger over in Sebastopol, Kevin and Lori up in Katati, and in San Francisco, oh boy, already I'm having a brain freeze. Okay, over in Arizona, my brother Brand and his wife Mina and their daughter Andrea, who is my niece. She's a nurse there. Take care of yourself, Andrea. And Dennis and Megan in Tiburon, and in Pacifica, Stan and Kathy. And I'm having a brain freeze on the name of their friend, who is Miss Lefty of Pacifica. Yvonne Santos in San Francisco and then down in L.A. Jackie Kolar and her two daughters, Melanie and Samantha. And up in Sonora, Robert and Colleen Finnegan, Bob and Sandy Fisher, and their daughter, Martha, who is also a nurse. Take care of yourself. And then Brad Fisher. And Leonidas Maciel, Judy May, Darrell Larson, Kathy Francis, and John Gleason and his two daughters, Tiffany and Jennifer. Boy, without notes, I am nothing. Okay, across to Arkansas, Shannon Reed, and then down to Florida, Amelia Beamer and Nelson and Alice Lydell, and then up to the Raleigh-Durham area, Dave Rubin, Dr. Dave Rubin, and then up to Long Island, Geraldine Goldfinger. Let's see, how many people have... Mickey Huff up in Sacramento. And I sent out a correction last week for all my listeners that want to get on the mailing list for Project Censored. Mickey Huff is the godfather of it. Go to projectcensored.org and sign up for their newsletter. It's very interesting, very interesting. He's a professor of history and communications at Diablo Valley College, which is, across the bay from us here in Petaluma. And, last week I ran out of time, which is something I rarely do. And there were a couple of segments that I just couldn't get to. Some good news, some bad news. Okay, let's get them out of the way. And this comes from last week. Let's see. A 5-minute rant, if you'll indulge me. Okay, ranting is what I do. Okay, Republican politicians and most of their base, which I term MAGA heads, there's some exceptions to honest, thoughtful, intelligent Republicans. They're in the vast minority of the Republican Party, but they exist, and I celebrate them. I have a few friends that are Republicans and a few relatives that are Republicans. They would not, I would disown them as relatives or friends if they were just MAGA heads. They're intelligent and they're relatively well-read and thoughtful and most importantly kind, but it perplexes me. Why on earth do they choose to align themselves with the vast majority of Republicans that are just stupid MAGA heads? Well, anyway, they choose to align themselves with the following dirtbags. Number 1 on the list, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. And I've been calling him sociopathic bloatbag junior. He's not orange. I guess his vague tanned coloration comes to him naturally, unlike the orange sociopathic bloatbag who probably spends about an hour in the morning applying his orange makeup. He probably has some young female assistant that does that for him. Okay. Number 2, Ted Cruz. The Texas vomit-inducing senator who let the orange sociopathic bloatbag get away with insulting his wife, insulting his dad, but yet he crawled back to the feet of the orange sociopathic bloatbag. Louis Gohmert from Texas, he's a House of Representatives. He is the stupidest congressman in the male category. There's other females. Ron Johnson, the stupidest senator from Wisconsin, and he's a premier election denier. Okay, and John Kennedy, a Republican senator from Louisiana. What irks me, well, I don't get irked by these people anymore, but what got him on this list was his fake foghorn leghorn Southern accent. And he's a well-educated. I think he was went over to Oxford and studied over there for a couple of years. And I don't know, he came back to Louisiana thinking that voters wanted him to sound like them. Well, he sounds like a fake. Oh boy, the word I'm looking for escapes me right now, but it's a fake accent. Okay. And if the Republicans end up winning the 2022 election, which, by the way, is in 6 days, this is Wednesday, so next Tuesday, my mail-in ballot has already been acknowledged by our election people here in Sonoma County, California. A mail-in election should be the norm for everybody. In Oregon, they've been doing it for decades with no problems until the orange sociopathic bloat bag and his minions came along. I will be mentioning more about them a bit later. Okay. Anyway, if Republicans come out on top, which is one of my worst nightmares, it will usher in the Republican dystopia. Oh my gosh. Please, voters out there, if you all agree with me, and I'm sure that all my listeners do, please get out and vote. Don't let this pass by. We don't want a Republican dystopia. Okay. Horrible fake journalist. James O'Keefe. He founded Project Veritas, headquartered back in New York. He's a conservative activist group that tries to lure liberals into doing things that might be embarrassing to them, and recording them in secret. They frequently edit their recordings, and I would imagine that they do it more often than not, editing their recordings, to make them seem worse than they really are. It has targeted Planned Parenthood, National Public Radio, and in 2009, this is where he came to my attention. In 2009, they targeted ACORN, which is an acronym for Association of Community Organizations for Reform. They're out of business now, largely due to James O'Keefe's efforts. You probably remember this in 2009. On the news, James O'Keefe dressed up as what he thinks pimps dress like, the long fur coat, and his female assistant. I didn't write down what her name was, but she is a Republican activist as well. Anyway, he went into the ACORN offices in LA, claiming to seek advice about how to bring underage girls across the border for sex trafficking. And they didn't take him seriously. They didn't know who he was. And it went out there, and once you put something out there like that, people, especially stupid MAGA heads, will believe it. And Congress, who had been funding partially ACORN's efforts at organizing communities and registering voters, especially of the voters of color, they cut off their funding, and it went downhill from there, and Acorn eventually went out of business. Okay, and James O'Keefe and his project Veritas lost a court case, and they are fined $150,000 because of a lawsuit that one of their victims brought against them. But they're funded by these right-wing sugar daddies, so that's not going to stop them from doing what they're doing. But James O'Keefe is another tool. Mickey Huff, Project Censored, called him a tool when he answered me that I was going to talk about James O'Keefe. Anyway, so I agree with you, Mickey Huff. He is a tool. Okay, and good news from Florida. The sociopathic bloatbag juniors, and you know who I mean, stunt to quote-unquote crack down on voter fraud by having state police arrest 19 ex-felons for voting is falling apart in court. The arrestees were told by state voting officials that they could vote, and they even have voting cards issued to them. The Tampa Bay Times, good newspaper down there, videoed some of the embarrassed police officers making these arrests of these confused citizens, mostly men of color. Bloatbag Jr., before all this happened, held a news conference to announce that he was cracking down on voter fraud. Okay, he held his news conference standing in front of a group of burly state police officers, and they were being used as props to make himself look tough on crime and voter fraud. What a joke that guy is. Please, if you're listening to me down in Florida, vote for Charlie Crist. Okay, a nice guy, intelligent, who way back when left the Republican Party because he saw the horrible direction that the Republican Party was going in, and so he became an independent. And he is now running against Bloatbag Jr. for the governorship of Florida. Please vote for Charlie Crist. Okay. Kind of bad news, but understandable. It always happens. The gas and oil industry is anticipating a GOP control of the House of Representatives in the 2022 election. Voters, please don't let this happen. Okay, the American Gas Association is firing up its lobbyists to push back against the Biden administration's perceived anti-fossil fuel agenda. They don't like that homes and appliances are being encouraged to go electric. Okay, there's a number of towns, cities here in California and probably across the nation who have stopped new buildings, high rises or homes, from having gas pipes piped into their houses for stoves and dryers and water heaters and everything that runs off gas. It's being outlawed. Berkeley is one of them that I know for sure. Everything is going electric now, and it doesn't bode well for the gas and oil industry. And electric cars don't bode well for the oil and gas industry. California is phasing out internal combustion engine cars by, I believe, 2035 is the last of them. They won't just disappear overnight, but no new internal combustion engine cars will be sold after that date. Okay, enough of the oil and gas industry. In San Francisco, a group of survivors of Catholic priest sexual abuse demanded that Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, who is another tool, publicly release a list of priests and others in the church who have been accused of abuse. Of course, he refused this. The organization, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, okay, the acronym is SNAP, S-N-A-P, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, has prepared its own list of 312 priests, brothers, and lay people in the archdiocese run 88 churches in San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo counties. They will release their list soon. Okay, whenever that is. Okay, lest you think I'm just picking on the Catholic Church, I've done segments on this show before about the Southern Baptists and sexual abuse. I've done segments on the Mormon Church and sexual abuse, and I'm beginning to think that being uber religious focuses your attention in the men on having sex all the time, especially with young children. They seem to go hand in hand for some reason. The weirdest, most, pedophiliac religious people are usually the uber religious. Okay? All right. And I've said before, it is my belief that if suddenly every religion just disappeared into the firmament, humanity would be better off and the earth would be a more peaceful place and kinder place. Okay. And I was going to end last week's show with good environmental news, but here it is. What I was going to end it with. In the Netherlands, a company, New Horizon, founded by Michael Bars, capital B-A-R-R-S, is an urban miner. That's how he describes himself. And what does an urban miner do, you might ask? He recycles and disassembles old buildings that might have just been demolished. Even the concrete is ground up to be reused. And this is a quote from him. "I have started to think of trash as a personal failure," unquote. Activists, architects, and designers are all on board in his organization, which is New Horizon. Okay, buildings should be like Legos, he says. When they are no longer useful, you disassemble them and reuse them to make new buildings. Okay, great news. I wish this guy well, and I wish that New Horizon and Michael Bars spread their gospel all over the planet. Okay, all right. Okay, I did the articles left to do from last week. I ran out of time, and then it lists what I should say. Okay, now on to today's actual rant by the Midnight Skeptic. Very good news for Cubans. Their new family code, in effect for 3 weeks now, made Cuba the 9th Latin American country to, ready for this, legalize gay marriage. Mariela Castro, who is the daughter of Raul Castro and niece of Fidel Castro, advocating for this change in the family code. Well, they finally did it. So Cuba is finally more progressive than MAGA-head Republicans. It's also my opinion that we should restore relations with Cuba. And I'm aware that officially they are a communistic country. In the same way that North Vietnam, I'm sorry, I'm aging myself. All of Vietnam is a communist country. Well, they have a lot of capitalistic endeavors going on in their country very successfully. And Cuba does as well. But the Cuban immigrant vote in Florida won't hear of it. We should restore relations with them and restore trade relations with them. And, the whole of the Caribbean would just be better off for it. And our country would be better off for it. Okay, without having to worry about the Cuban immigrant vote. Okay, that was good news from Cuba and the world. Okay, bad news in Russia. Besides the war in Ukraine going badly for them, Russia is taking a page out of the MAGA-head playbook. To wit, the Russian Duma, which is their, fake elected assembly, has just banned, are you ready for this? Gay propaganda, quote unquote, or its own version of the Republicans' Don't Say Gay bill. Portrayal of gay relationships in books, films, the media, and the internet is hereby outlawed. Information deemed by the powers that be to encourage children to change their gender is also outlawed and subject to fines. The Kremlin and Putin, who is the master of the orange sociopathic bloat bag, who is Putin's pet, and the Kremlin is embracing, quote-unquote, traditional values, just like the Southern Baptists here in this country are embracing traditional values. That's the way that God wants it. All right. Onward. Time check. It's about a half an hour's worth of ranting tonight. I need a sip, and this is orange juice this time. I drank practically a whole 6-cup pot of coffee this morning, and I've had enough caffeine, although I can never get enough caffeine. Or cat petting. Very good news for 2 women who have found happiness. Miss Argentina, Mariana Varela, and Miss Puerto Rico, Fabiola Valentin, announced they are now married. They met at Miss Grand International in 2020. The Midnight Skeptic wishes them both much happiness in their future lives together. Okay, that was good news. This a bit of bad news, unfortunately. MAGA-head GOP ignorance on display. Ohio State Representative Bill Dean, a Republican, of course, called rising U.S. maternal mortality rates a myth. Well, we have the statistics to back it up, that it's not a myth. And he blamed high mortality rates on, quote unquote, lifestyle choices to do with abortions and weight. So you think this creep enjoys body shaming women? Of course he does, as do all MAGA heads. Okay, Dean doubled down in a debate with his opponent, who is Jim Duffee. I think that's how you pronounce it. Capital Duffee, a doctor. And this is, it was Area 71, I guess District 71 in Ohio, where they're running against each other for a Ohio state representative. Please, anybody in Ohio that's listening to me rant, please vote for Jim Duffee. He is a doctor, after all. And here's another Dean quote, Bill Dean, Republican. Quote, pregnancy is a natural thing that women are made for. That's the way God made them. The myth is that it is dangerous. It is no more dangerous than living every day. MAGA head. Here's a fact. In 2018, there were 17 maternal deaths for every 100,000 live births in the United States. That's more than double that of most other high-income developed countries. New Zealand, Norway, and the Netherlands had fewer than 3 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births. Okay? If there's any MAGA heads out there that want to actually research these statistics, they're freely available from a number of different sources. Okay. MAGA heads tell everybody how bad the ACA is. Oh boy, I botched that. Sorry. I was being snarky here. MAGA heads tell everybody how bad the ACA Act is, which is better known as Obamacare, which the very mention of that sends MAGA heads into paroxysms of hate and spittle coming out of their mouth. Okay. In the U.S., midwife care services are not covered by private insurance plans. The ACA requires that state Medicaid programs cover midwifery care. In the U.S., no paid maternity leave is available or guaranteed. Some enlightened companies do offer that for their employees, but there is no law saying paid maternity leave is required. Unlike most progressive countries that don't have MAGA heads running them. Let's see, what was I doing? Okay, maternity care. Okay, do you remember back in 2009 when President Obama was trying to get Obamacare passed? It was Nancy Pelosi that helped with this effort. She's as much given credit as President Obama is for the ACA that gives a lot of people, not everybody, medical care. I think I'm going to have a little bit more to say about that. Anyway, okay. Let's see. Obamacare. Horrible news. Josh Shapiro Pennsylvania Attorney General announced that 4 Jehovah's Witnesses have been arrested and charged with child sexual abuse on October 27th, which was Thursday of last week. The crimes are all separate, but all took place within Jehovah's Witnesses communities in Pennsylvania. What are they trying to do? Out-Catholic the Catholics? Quote, most of these defendants used their faith and church to gain access to their victims, to build trust, and then molested them, quote, unquote. Shapiro said. The 4th molester, out of the 4 that were arrested, the 3 are on trial, the 4th molester took his own life when officers attempted to arrest him. The first, Jose Serrano, molested 6 young girls, including his daughter. Okay, when I was talking about, Archbishop Salvatore in San Francisco, and I mentioned those other religions that seem to unleash in the male religious community, they seem to focus their attentions on young children, mostly girls. But Jehovah's Witnesses, they are not, repeat, not holier than thou. MAGA-head GOP policies are literally killing Americans. Excuse me for 1 minute for my YouTube people. I had an eyelash fall into my eye, and so for the radio people this Sunday, that explains the pause. Okay, MAGA-head GOP policies are literally killing Americans. Homicide rates are higher in states with weaker gun laws. States with an F grade based on the strength of their gun laws. Okay, according to the Giffords, you remember Gabby Giffords that got shot in Arizona, which is now an open carry state? According to the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, MAGA heads would never support an outfit like that. Okay, saw the highest homicide rates. Okay, wait a second. There's a difference between writing notes to speak over the air and writing an essay like I would write if I were just doing it to hand into a political science class. Okay, sometimes I get lost in trying to make sense of what I wrote. And this is one of those times. Okay, states with an F grade based on the strength of their gun laws saw the highest homicide rates. Okay, and Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Wyoming, those are the states with the highest homicide rates. Okay, guess who runs those states? MAGA-head Republicans. Okay, in 2020, the 10 states with the highest rates of gun deaths among children and teenagers ages 1 through 19 were Louisiana, Alaska, Mississippi, South Carolina, Arkansas, Kansas, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Alabama, all F-grade states, all MAGA-controlled states. It's not just the gun issue. MAGA-head-controlled states also have refused Medicaid expansion, even though federal money is available for almost all of the state's costs. Most of the states that have not expanded Medicare are, you guessed it, GOP MAGA states. Texas, Florida, Mississippi, Alaska, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kansas, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. I don't think every single state on this list is a MAGA head-controlled state, but Republicans and concern for the health and well-being of their constituents are practically nil. Why do these MAGA heads keep getting themselves reelected? I said on a couple of shows ago that what I would like to do, and maybe I'll do it this upcoming summer, is to take a car ride through. I'm not going to go all the way to the East Coast, but down into some MAGA states, like Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, maybe even Texas, and ask, middle-class voters, just everyday people, why do they dislike Democrats so much? And I think I know part of the answer, and I'm not going to go into it now, but part of the reason is they have been, like a flock of sheep, conditioned by Fox News to look at, people from the Bay Area, like me, for instance, who's a Democratic voter, that we're elites. That was one of their favorite pejoratives over the last, since the turn of the century, not 1800s to 1900s, but 1900s to 2000. We're elites. We have a college degree. Wow, who wants those people running our country? We'll get healthy and we won't be able to have our guns. They're going to take them all. Okay, enough of that. Okay, I promised to end the show with good news, and I wrote this, and then there was other things to add on. So this is good news, but it's not the end of the show. I've got about 15 more minutes. And okay, I promised to end the show with good news. Good environmental news. A marine kelp forest renews itself with the help from volunteers. Divers have spent thousands of hours, these are volunteer divers, thousands of hours collecting the sea urchins that voraciously eat kelp at a site called Tanker Reef in Monterey Bay near the tourist hangout in the city. Divers culled over 500,000 purple sea urchins. Now, normally they would be eaten by starfish, and there is a disease going around in starfish circles that kill them off. Now, they're not all dead, but it's alarming, and scientists are trying to study what the disease parasite or a virus is that's killing off starfish. Well, without starfish, urchins multiply. When urchins multiply, they eat more and more of the kelp forests. Well, these volunteer divers are going down there and plucking the sea urchins off the floor and bringing them up and disposing of them. Okay. A non-profit organization called Giant Kelp Restoration, GKR, got the volunteer divers all together. The kelp forests that used to cover hundreds of miles of the California coast provided vital habitat to young fish, crabs, and marine mammals and seabirds. Between 2014 and 2019, the kelp forest decreased in size by 95%. Okay, but Giant Kelp Restoration, the outfit, the nonprofit, has demonstrated that if you have enough divers to go down there and bring up the urchins, the purple urchins that eat it all, that the kelp forest can regenerate itself. That's good news. And they will be expanding their efforts all up and down the California coast, off the Mendocino coast and the Marin and Sonoma County coasts in the very near future. Good for them. Okay, when I wrote my announcement of this show that I'm doing right now on Facebook, I said that Kari Lake is truly a horrible person. And here I am. I'm going to back that up. And there's a number of people that agreed with me and hit a like button. And she's running for governor of Arizona. And please, please, Arizonans, don't vote her into the governorship. And I'm going to tell you why. She mocked the attack on Paul Pelosi, which happened a couple of days ago, by this nutbag who believes in QAnon conspiracy theories and believes that Nancy Pelosi is the spawn of Satan. I'm making that up. He didn't actually say this, but he is a MAGA head of the worst kind. Okay, she mocked the attack on Paul Pelosi at a campaign event in Arizona, near Scottsdale, I think it was. Her remarks drew laughter from the crowd. She was asked by, I guess, a reporter or a TV personality or somebody about school security. Lake suggested the protection afforded to federal lawmakers should be available to students as well. Okay, that's fine. We don't have enough law enforcement officers of any kind in this country to do that. I'm not sure if she realizes that. Okay, and then here comes the quote. Nancy Pelosi, well, she's got protection when she's in D.C. Apparently her house doesn't have a lot of protection. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Much laughter from the MAGA heads out in the audience. She drew a lot of laughter. And, you know, I'm not presenting her quote as snarkily and as deadpan as she did, but because she's a radio professional, whereas I'm just a good radio professional. Anyway, let me repeat the quote again. This is from Kari Lake. Quote, Nancy Pelosi, well, she's got protection when she's in D.C., snarky. Apparently her house doesn't have a lot of protection. Now, you can read that in a number of ways. Her physical house here in San Francisco doesn't have a lot of protection, or the House of Representatives doesn't have a lot of protection from MAGA voters. Yay! Okay. As far as migrants seeking asylum, she echoes the orange sociopathic bloatbag's claim when he came down the escalator back in 2015. You all remember that, I hope, when he was coming down that escalator in Trump Tower, followed by his rent-a-wife. And then he gave a announcement speech that he was running for president. Anyway, she echoed his claims. They are all rapists, drug dealers, and criminals, meaning crossing our border. Fact. Here's a fact. According to the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, less than 1% of border crossers fit this description. And another fact, cities and towns with the greatest number of Latino immigrants are the most crime-free towns and cities. Now, MAGA heads would have you believe that immigrants, meaning from South and Central America, are just a crime wave. And they're not. Especially the undocumented ones don't want to bring attention to themselves, and they don't want to be arrested. They are law-abiding citizens, citizen wannabes. They want to have a pathway to citizenship, and I'm going to say something about that too in a minute. When asked about the 2022 election, Kari Lake said, quote, "I'm going to win the election and I will accept that result." When called on that, all she did was just repeat it again. "I'm going to win the election and I will accept that result." Okay, that's why I said that Kari Lake is truly a horrible person. And I stand by that, and just for those quotes alone. All right? Whew, another sip. I gotta flush my mouth out of Kari Lake. On to happier things. Whew. Good news. New polling this week finds that voters in 5 battleground states overwhelmingly back a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and are more likely to support a candidate who favors a pro-immigration policy. 73% of voters in Arizona, you listening, Kari? In Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin support legalization if background checks are met. Okay, that's reasonable. DACA, D-A-C-A, is currently under attack due to MAGA-head GOP litigation. They're trying to get rid of the DACA Act. Hateful, fearful, MAGA-head Republicans. Okay. Last thing. Good news, good news, good news. The Australian Mormon Church has been busted. They had their flock send tithes, and I think they have to do 10% each year of their earnings as a tithe to the church. Maybe it's even monthly. I don't really know. I don't really care either. Okay. They had their flock send tithes to a shell company to exploit a loophole in Australian tax law. Again, faith equals donations of your hard-earned money. Religion equals exploitation. People out there, don't fall for it. Become one of the nuns. N-O-N-E-S. The irreligious, the thinking people, the people that, are not going to be part of any kind of a flock. Okay, I need to use my sound effects more than I do. Here, okay, how much time do I have left? Okay, about 5 minutes. Okay, my audio engineer, Dennis, set up the sound effects. I'm going to play them all, okay, including my play in music and play out music. And then here is... I should have played that after I read the bit about the Australian Mormon church being busted. Okay, and laughter. I think I should play that every time the orange sociopathic bloat bag is mentioned, or Ted Cruz is mentioned, or Louis Gohmert is mentioned. Okay. Okay, that's a slide whistle. I'm not sure exactly when I would use that, but here's the last one. I think I should mention that every time I mention one of the more egregious MAGA candidates. Okay, look, the election is next Tuesday, the 8th. Please get out and vote. And I'm saying this to all voters, although I would encourage more young people to get out and register as Democrats if you want this country to survive the onslaught of hateful, fearful, stupid, MAGA-head Republicans that are going to institute a Republican dystopia. Okay, that's all I have to say for tonight. Here is my play out music. Thank you, Dennis. You have been listening to The Midnight Skeptic on KPCA LP, Petaluma, California. And we're at 103.3 on the FM dial and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. Support community radio at patreon.com/Petaluma Community Access. And remember, think critically, think logically, but live joyously, and most importantly, pet your cats. About petting your cats, there's an article in a neuroscience journal that I will talk to you about next week, about petting your cat is you reduce your anxieties, among other things. So please get out and pet your cats. Take good care of them. And we will see you next week. And I will be talking to you next week. Listen in this coming Sunday at 9 p.m. KPCA LP 103.3 FM, and listen to my rants.